ADDIE is an instructional design model that helps instructors, instructional designers, and training specialists plan and create instruction. The ADDIE model is used to create all kinds of instruction, from teaching high school students about calculus to training doctors on how to use state-of-the-art medical equipment. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the first phase, the analysis phase. Doing a thorough analysis before developing and implementing training can save a lot of time and resources. The analysis phase generally consists of 4 subphases: the development of instructional goals, an instructional analysis, a learner analysis, and the development of learning objectives. So let's talk for a minute about the first step, developing instructional goals. Let's say you have a friend that wants you to teach him how to make pizza. Better yet, his mom wants you to teach him how to make pizza. To do this effectively, you would have to clearly define what the goal of this little training would be. Does she want him to know how to build every type of pizza, from 4 cheese to Alfredo chicken to stuffed crust? Or does she just have a certain type of pizza in mind? Finding out and making a clear instructional goal can save a lot of time and effort. In this case, you would simply have to talk to your friend's mom. She's your client. Once you have clearly defined what your instructional goals are, you will be better equipped to develop the instruction. So let's say that your friend's mom wants him to learn how to make a simple pepperoni pizza. That's the instructional goal. Good. Now we can move on to the next part of the analysis phase, instructional analysis. During the instructional analysis, a curriculum creator defines and writes out all of the steps necessary to carry out the instructional goals. Now, this phase is often not as simple as it seems. In our pizza analogy, it sounds easy enough at first. Just roll out the dough, throw on the sauce, cheese, and pepperoni, and toss it in the oven, right? Well, it's actually a lot more complicated. Your friend has to know how to make dough or where to buy it. He needs to know what techniques and tools are required to roll it out. He needs to know the ingredients of the sauce and how to spread it out evenly. There are basic steps, but each step can have its own sub-steps. A finished instructional analysis is a chart that looks something like this. It is very specific and outlines the goal steps learners need to have to achieve the instructional goal. Many instructional designers are continually adding to and refining their instructional analysis as they go through the other steps of designing training. The next part of the analysis phase is the learner analysis. This is when you find out what your learners already know about the subject at hand. When you have a specific set of learners, and our example just one guy, it's a lot easier to do a learner analysis. Just call him and talk to him. If your learning audience is bigger, say 10th grade physics students in the Clark County School District, you may have to do more research and even conduct interviews and surveys. Knowing where your learners stand regarding your subject helps you know how much or how little you need to teach them. Say you talk to your friend and find out he's a connoisseur of spaghetti sauces and knows how to make a delicious one by heart. Well, then you know you don't have to go into much detail when talking to him about making pizza sauce. If you hadn't done a learner analysis and found that out, you could have wasted a lot of time and effort teaching what you already knew about. Step 4 is creating learning objectives. Learning objectives are what students should be able to do when instruction is completed. They are usually in the form of skills, attitude, or knowledge. A good way to write a learning objective is to fill in the following sentence. By the time a student finishes this course, he or she should be able to blank. This is another time when we have to be very specific and use strong verbs that specifically define student performance. In our example, we know our instructional goal is to teach your friend how to make a pizza, but we need to be more specific with our learning objectives. Based on what we learned in our instructional analysis and learner analysis, we can come up with some good learning objectives, like this. At the end of our course, our students should be able to describe how to make pizza dough from scratch, demonstrate how to roll it out evenly, show how to add sauce, cheese, and pepperoni correctly, explain at what temperature the pizza needs to be cooked and for how long. Knowing what our learning objectives are is going to go a long way in helping us design our course. So, that's a basic overview of the analysis phase of the ADDIE model. Can you see how doing this groundwork before creating instructional materials can help you utilize your resources better? Good. Next, we'll talk about the design phase. Thanks for watching. Is an instructional design model that helps instructors, instructional designers, and training specialists plan and create instruction. The ADDIE model is used to create all kinds of instruction, from showing call center employees how to use a new software system to training military personnel to use specific tactical strategies. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the second phase, the design phase. During the design phase, curriculum developers design assessments, choose a course format, and create an instructional strategy. It may seem counterintuitive to design the assessment of a course before you begin creating the content, but it is actually very helpful to know how you are going to test your learners' knowledge, attitude, and skills about your subject when you are creating your instructional materials. To design effective assessments, you are going to use a lot of what you learned during the previous ADDIE phase, the analysis phase. Dick, Carey, and Carey point out that there are 4 areas to consider when designing a good assessment question or task: the instruction's goals, learner, and context, as well as the assessment itself. It is very important to consider the goals of your instruction as you design your assessment. Let's say you are teaching a group of not-so-computer literate folks about how to use email. During the analysis phase, you would have created performance objectives, or what the students would do to demonstrate that they learned the content. Now, you can use these performance objectives to help you create effective assessments. If one of your performance objectives was for students to demonstrate how to open up a web browser and sign into a web-based email account, then you should make sure to test that knowledge at the end of the course. As you write out this question or task, remember to keep in mind what you learned about your learners during the analysis phase. In our example, your learners aren't very computer literate, so you should avoid using unnecessarily obscure or complicated terms in your assessment. Whenever possible, you should assess skills like this in a context as close to the eventual performance setting as possible. Having them answer a multiple choice question about how to sign into an email account won't be nearly as effective as giving them a task to do so on a physical computer. And be sure to be thorough when you research your learner's performance context. Let's say you find out that, after your course is over, your students will be using PCs to write their emails. Then you would do well to assess them on a PC. It wouldn't be helpful to have them do it on a Mac or on a smartphone. Make sure your assessment questions and tasks are written clearly, with correct punctuation and grammar. Also, avoid the temptation to trick learners by intentionally writing complicated or misleading questions. If your instructional goal is to help students learn to use email, then test them on that, not on how good they are at answering trick questions. Once you know how your learners are going to be tested, then you can go about choosing a course format. The course format, also sometimes called the delivery system, is the medium by which the course content is presented to learners. Courses can be taught in a traditional classroom setting, by correspondence, as a telecourse, through a self-paced workbook, over the internet, or in a blended course that combines different methods. In our example, we know that your students are going to be tested using PC computers. It would be most effective then to choose a course format that would allow them to use PC computers when you teach them, like a computer lab. Now that you've designed your assessment and picked a course format, you can begin to create your instructional strategy. An instructional strategy is the collection of lectures, readings, discussions, projects, worksheets, assessments, and activities to help the students learn the course content. Dick, Carey, and Carey have outlined 5 major learning components that are part of an overall instructional strategy. They are the pre-instructional activities, the content presentation, learner participation, assessment, and follow-through activities. When planning your pre-instructional activities, first include a way to motivate your learners. In our example, you could talk to your students about how using email could benefit them, perhaps by helping them pay their bills more effectively or keeping in touch with relatives. Motivating your learners will help them see the value of your material and internalize the instruction. Then, plan a way to illustrate the course objectives. This will help them mentally organize the components of the instruction and know how they're going to apply their knowledge. There are a few things to keep in mind when planning your content presentation. First, make sure your content is concise and not filled with unnecessary detail. Just stick to the objectives of the class. It may sound fun to relay the history of email and how it got started, but it isn't going to help your students reach the objective of the class. And be sure to include examples. This could be as simple as walking students through the process of signing onto an email account on a digital projector. It is very important to plan plenty of learner participation in your instructional strategy. This means allowing your students to practice a task as well as providing them with feedback. In our example, you could let students try sending you a message on their own computers and then tell them what they did right or where they tripped up. You will then want to plan for assessment in your instructional strategy. In addition to the final assessment we talked about earlier, you may want to include practice assessments as well as a final attitude assessment, which asks your learners how they felt about the course. The final thing you want to include in your instructional strategy is a set of follow-through activities. This is a review of the entire course strategy with an eye toward helping students internalize and apply the instruction after the class is over. So that's the basic overview of the design phase of the ADDIE model. Designing assessments, choosing the right course format, and carefully putting together an instructional strategy will make developing your course content a lot more easy and effective. In our next video, we'll discuss the second D in the ADDIE process, the development phase. We'll see you then. Specialists plan and create instruction. The ADDIE model is used to create all kinds of instruction, from showing auto mechanics students how to repair carburetors to training astronauts on launch procedures. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the third phase, the development phase. During the development phase, curriculum developers create a sample, develop the actual course materials, and conduct a run-through. Let's say you have a newspaper route, and your boss wants you to teach his kid how to do it while you're away on vacation. After going through the analysis and design phases, you'll want to create a sample of your instructional materials and show them to your boss. This may consist of a portion of the map you are going to create, and a paragraph or two of the written instructions you are going to write, as well as the instructional strategy you developed during the design phase. Since he is your client and is going to have final say in the instruction, you're going to want to show him your progress and get his ideas and feedback. You don't want to go to the trouble of creating all your instructional materials and then find out that he didn't like the approach you made or that there was something wrong with them. After you and your client are sufficiently satisfied with the sample instruction, it is time to dig in and develop the course materials. You should have already decided which instructional activities to include during the design phase when you made your instructional strategy. Use that and the sample instruction you made as a starting point, and keep the comments and feedback from your client in mind. When you are finished developing the course materials, hold a review session with your client and see if he or she has any more comments or suggestions. Once you have created your course materials and gone through them with your client, it will be time to conduct a run-through of your instruction. This is a real-time rehearsal of the course, using all the materials and media you have created. In our simple example, this could be showing a friend the instructions and map you created, as well as a walkthrough of your paper route if that was part of your instructional strategy. You would treat your friend as if she were the actual student, in this case your boss's kid. It's a good idea to prepare a feedback assessment ahead of time as well, to find out if there are any areas you can improve on. You will want to time your run-through as well. If your boss was only going to give you an hour to train his kid, you're going to want to make sure you can do it in the allotted time. So, that's a basic overview of the development phase of the ADDIE model. If you've done a thorough analysis and design, the development phase will go a lot smoother, though it still takes time to create quality instructional materials. Next, we'll take a closer look at the implementation phase. Thanks for watching. It's used to create all kinds of instruction, from teaching potential stockbrokers about mutual funds to training helicopter pilots on emergency landing techniques. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the 4th phase, the implementation phase. There are three parts to the implementation phase: training the instructor, preparing the learners, and arranging the learning space. In a lot of cases, the person that develops a course or training is also the one that teaches it. But there are also plenty of situations where the developer turns the course over to a different trainer or instructor. Let's say a friend hired you to develop the material for his beginning guitar class. After you have gone through the analysis, design, and development phases, you'll want to train your friend on the instructional material you've developed. He'll need to know the course objectives and activities you've planned, and be familiar with all of the media and assessments he is going to use. This means you'll have to have all the materials ready well before the first class session, so your friend has time to get acquainted with the material and be comfortable with it. In professional settings, developers sometimes have to train dozens of instructors on a particular course or learning module in many different areas. The next part of the implementation phase is preparing the learners for instruction. This means making sure they have the tools and knowledge necessary to participate in the class. In higher education settings, this means verifying they have taken the proper prerequisites, gone through any necessary orientation, and are trained on any learning management software that would be utilized in the class. In our example, your friend would have to make sure each student knew when and where the guitar class was taking place, as well as what materials they would have to provide for themselves, like a guitar, tuner, and pick. Once the instructor and learners are prepared, it is necessary to make sure that the learning space is arranged. This means more than just making sure there are enough chairs and desks for everyone. Let's say that, in our example, your instructor is going to show your students a video about how to tune guitars. He'll want to make sure that he has the technology available to do this. It is also a good idea to test any multimedia equipment beforehand, in the actual learning space. This will help ensure that the instruction will go smoothly, without any technical difficulties. Instructors should also do things like print out all the handouts they will use during the instruction, and make sure they have a whiteboard and markers ready if they are planning on using them. Getting these types of details squared away beforehand allows instructors to put their full attention to delivering the course and focusing on the learner's experience. So that's it for our basic overview of the implementation phase of the ADDIE model. Properly training the instructor, preparing the learners, and arranging the learning space will make the course delivery much more effective and efficient. Next, we'll discuss the final phase in the ADDIE process, the evaluation phase. We'll see you then. Instructional designers and training specialists plan and create instruction. The ADDIE model is used to create all kinds of instruction, from 5th grade social studies lessons to online computer programming courses. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the 5th phase, the evaluation phase. There are 2 parts to the evaluation phase: formative evaluation and summative evaluation. Even though it is the final letter in the ADDIE acronym, most of the evaluation phase doesn't come last. You should actually be evaluating your instructional materials as you go through each part of the ADDIE process. This continual appraisement is called formative evaluation. Dick, Carey, and Carey's instructional model outlines 3 basic stages of formative evaluation: one-to-one evaluation, small group evaluation, and a field trial. Let's say that you and a friend are going to be holding a basketball training camp for 11-year-olds and are showing a short video to help the kids learn the basic rules of basketball. During your one-to-one evaluation, you would want to test the effectiveness of this video with a child close to the age and abilities as your actual learners. You would then ask them a series of questions about the effectiveness of the video. First, about the clarity. Was the message clear and easy to understand? Then ask about the impact. Was it helpful in reaching the objectives and goals of the class? Finally, you would assess the feasibility. How practical is the video given the time and context of the class? When doing all of these assessments, it is important to make sure that you carefully write out your assessment questions beforehand. Make them clear, consistent, and as objective as possible. Doing a number of one-to-one assessments for each of the workshop's activities will help you identify the most and least effective areas of your instruction and improve upon it. After you have made improvements based on what you learned during your one-to-one evaluations, it will be time to do a small group evaluation. This will help you determine how effective those changes were, as well as monitor how well your activities work in a group setting. It is best to choose participants that accurately represent the different subgroups that will be participating in your actual course. In our example, this would mean choosing children that are well versed in basketball, as well as those that aren't as experienced. During this small group evaluation, you will once again assess the clarity, impact, and feasibility of each of your activities. Dick, Carrie, and Carrie also recommend adding an attitude questionnaire, asking questions like this. Was the instruction interesting? Did you understand what you were supposed to learn? Were the materials directly related to the objectives? Were there sufficient practice exercises? Did the tests really measure your knowledge of the objectives? Did you receive sufficient feedback? After you use a small group evaluation to further refine your instruction, you'll be ready to do a field trial. This is a real-time rehearsal of all the instructional activities you have planned for your course. You will want to conduct it in a setting similar to the eventual instructional setting, to take into account any environmental variables. Once again, you will assess the clarity, impact, and feasibility of your instruction, and make changes accordingly. Then you will be ready to deliver your instruction. The other stage in the evaluation phase is the summative evaluation. The purpose of a summative evaluation is to prove the worth of the instruction after it is completed. Kirkpatrick's model outlines 4 types of outcomes to evaluate: the reaction, learning, behavior, and results. It is wise to document the reaction of your learners. This is most easily done by writing a series of statements and having the students indicate how strongly they agree or disagree, like this. The basketball camp's objectives were clear to me. The drills and exercises fit in with the goals of the camp. The instructions we were given were clear and easy to understand. It is also a good idea to document more specific reactions about the instructor, activities, assessments, and audio visuals, like this. The video on the rules of basketball was helpful and informative. The passing drill we did helped my passing abilities. The instructor was kind and treated me with respect. A few open-ended questions can be helpful as well, especially about the overall strengths and weaknesses of the course. And make sure to make your feedback survey anonymous. This encourages learners to truly express their attitudes without fear of judgment or retribution. All of this feedback will once again help you know what went well in the course and what can be improved upon. The next aspect to evaluate is the learning that took place. This is most typically done in the form of a post-test that evaluates how well your students achieved your learning objectives. Knowledge is typically assessed in achievement tests. In our example, this could consist of multiple choice questions, testing your learners' understanding of the rules of basketball. Skills are typically assessed in performance tests. This could mean having students show you their passing, shooting, and dribbling form, while you took notes on a rubric you constructed beforehand. Attitudes are typically assessed on questionnaires, similar to the reaction surveys we talked about a moment ago. Behavior evaluation involves measuring the transfer of knowledge, skills, and attitudes from the training context to the actual performance setting. It is especially important to track this in professional settings. If you trained call center employees on a new way of upselling customers, you will want to evaluate whether or not they are doing this on their actual calls. In our basketball camp example, this could mean seeing whether or not your students utilize the skills you taught them as they played basketball games outside your workshop. Finally, you will want to measure the results of your training. In professional settings, this could mean seeing how well the training affected things like profits, productivity, morale, and job satisfaction. In our basketball example, this could mean assessing the training's effects on your players' confidence, enjoyment, and win-loss rates. So that's it for our basic overview of the evaluation phase of the ADDIE model. Conducting formative evaluations during each stage of the ADDIE process, as well as administering a summative evaluation after the course is implemented, will help you make sure your course is helping reach your instructional goals. Thanks for watching.